Good afternoon. My name's Michael Barnbrook. I'm here this afternoon to interview Michaela Mackenzie about her recent experience regarding an employment tribunal against Nick Griffin and the British National Party. Good afternoon, Michaela.
Hello, Michael.
Would you like to tell us how this matter all started?
Yes, I believe it was for two reasons. The first was that Jim Dawson, who was the party fundraiser but who now seems to control all the party's core operations, asked me to dismiss another member of staff in breach of employment law. The second reason was that we were sent a data file from the Belfast office, which was clearly one of Jim Dawson's anti-abortion databases, and I refused to send out inquiry packs to these people because it would have been a gross breach of the Data Protection Act.
So your problems effectively started, Michaela, when you queried the Belfast operation?
Yes, and it all escalated very quickly after that. The very next day, we turned up for work, and all of a sudden, Martin Reynolds and two others burst into the office, demanded that we surrender our mobile phones, any other office equipment we had, to pack our belongings and get out of the office.
So you were suspended. What happened next, Michaela?
The very next day, I was offered a financial sweetener to say nothing and go quietly. I refused to do this because I felt it was a dirty under-the-table deal, and had I accepted it, it may have looked as though I'd done something wrong, and I hadn't, because all I was trying to do was to protect the party from an unfair claim dismissal and a prosecution under the Data Protection Act.
So at that stage you were only suspended?
Yes. Then, within a matter of days, I received a letter of dismissal, citing that I'd failed to complete a satisfactory probationary period, which was a bit odd because I'd been working for the party for 17 months. I spent the next 2 weeks in a state of shock, thinking, well, Nick can't know about this, and when he finds out what's really happened, he'll ring up and say it's all been a terrible mistake. But then it became evident that he had actually been in on it with Jim Dawson. He'd agreed to my termination, and I sought the advice of an employment law solicitor who said I had a cast iron case for unfair dismissal.
So let me get this straight, Michaela. You went to your solicitor last June, and it's taken almost a year to get to an employment tribunal?
Yes, that's right. But actually, the original date for my employment tribunal hearing was the 19th of January. But Nick Griffin avoided and delayed. He missed deadlines for the submission of papers. And then he made the excuse that he had a general election to fight and couldn't possibly be available until June.
I understand that having dismissed you for failing to complete a proper probationary period, he then approached you and offered you your job back.
Yes, that's right. Because Mr. Griffin had failed to submit the papers on time in response to my claim, my solicitor applied to the tribunal for a summary judgment, which Mr. Griffin knew would go against him. So, as an act of desperation, he offered me my job back in December 2009.
But Michaela, I don't understand this. You've been in the party, the British National Party, for almost 10 years. You're obviously a passionate nationalist. Here was Nick offering you the opportunity to come back into the fold, and you turned it down. I mean, why was that?
I didn't trust his motives, and neither did my solicitor. I thought that either he'd have me back for 3 or 4 months and then go through the correct procedures to get rid of me. And I really felt that the offer was made simply to get me to drop my claim for unfair dismissal.
So, not having been in court before, did you find the experience traumatic? I mean, after all, you're taking on the British National Party without any supports. I mean, how did you feel about that?
I found the whole year traumatic, Michael. And court appearances are like water off a duck's back to Nick Griffin. He's been there so many times. I've never experienced it, so it was very unnerving.
So how did the court case go, Michaela?
Well, Nick Griffin was the first to take the stand, and for 3 hours he told lie after vicious lie about me, and I had to sit there, unable to say anything. But the judge kept asking him, "But where is your evidence, Mr. Griffin?" And he would bluster and say, well, he'd heard this or he'd heard that. And the judge would say again, "But where is your evidence, Mr. Griffin?" And the more he was browbeaten by the judge, the more vicious he became. And it was very clear, I think, to all 3 tribunal judges that Mr. Griffin could not produce one single shred of evidence in support of anything he said.
So, Michaela, what was Mr. Griffin's demeanour like in court, in front of the judges?
Well, he began in a very strident and grandstanding fashion, and I had the impression that he thought because he was an MEP, the judges would be very deferential towards him and simply accept anything he said as being true. When Mr. Griffin realised that that wasn't actually the case and he was being asked repeatedly to produce evidence, he became rather less arrogant.
So, having spent 3 hours in the witness box on the first day, Michaela, what happened when you got to court on the second day?
Well, on the second day, the press turned up, and I was the next one due on the stand. And having had such a trouncing the day before, I don't think Mr. Griffin wanted me or my witnesses to be heard by the press. And first thing in the morning, before we even were due to go into court to reconvene the case, he decided to settle. He caved in.
So after he caved in, as you put it, what was the terms of the settlement that you were offered?
I can't discuss the terms of the settlement, Michael, because I gave an undertaking in court not to do so. And I think the reason Nick Griffin insisted on that was that he didn't want the members to know how much it had cost them.
So, having received your settlement, you've been through this traumatic experience, you were ready to get on with the rest of your life, were you?
Well, I'm not happy, Michael, because Nick Griffin signed a legal undertaking in court in front of 3 tribunal judges to pay the settlement by the 14th of July. He reneged on that. So my solicitor has now issued a statutory demand for payment, which gives him a further 21 days to pay, and I think there's about a week to go now. And if he ignores that, she will petition him for bankruptcy.
So let me get this straight, Michaela. Mr. Griffin's reneged on a court settlement. Mm-hmm. He knows you're a vulnerable woman. You're on your own. He knows you're out of work, and he's got a week to pay, and he still hasn't paid you the money. He must know that you will issue bankruptcy proceedings, which could be the end of the British National Party, and he's still conducting himself in this manner.
That's right. We know that Mr. Griffin has received the statutory demand for payment because Royal Mail have confirmed that it was signed for at his Welshpool address, so he is aware of it. I think there's a little over a week left for him to pay, and if he doesn't, my solicitor will petition for bankruptcy proceedings against him. My only worry and my only regret is what this may do to the party.